I know Ed's big thing was he said that him and Ronnie were driving around one day, and Ronnie Cruz told him that there's some kids playing in the yard. He said, well, those kids deserve water too, and that was kind of Ed's thing. Whenever he'd go look at an area that we wanted to go into, or there was a request in that area, he said, well, those kids need water too, is what he always said.
In 1961, when NASA launched the Liberty Bell 7, they made Mitchell native Gus Grissom the second American in space. At the time, Gus represented the apex of American technology. Yet, his neighbors and friends in southern Indiana continued to rely on water supplies little changed from pioneer days: cisterns, shallow wells, and springs. Sources often poor in quality, high in sulfur, and all unreliable in dry times. When the droughts came, and they came often, water was hauled from larger towns, which happened to have been fortunate enough to be located along streams. It was a stark contrast in technology. "1965 had been another dry year. The drought, which began in '63, would linger through '66. Ironically, in the midst of that drought, torrential rainfall turned the sleepy little Patoka River into a raging flood. The Indianapolis Star called it the worst flood since 1945. From Madison to Evansville, high water marooned motorists. By March 10th, all roads in the Patoka Valley were closed. The town of Paoli was cut off. In French Lick, floodwaters surrounded the Campbell Piano Factory. 15 employees were stranded. Floodwaters surrounded the town of DuBois. Again. After flying over the area, Governor Matthew Welsh asserted that the damage in DuBois County exceeded the cost of the yet-to-be-approved Patoka Reservoir. But that was a year ago. The floodwaters disappeared as fast as they had appeared. Homes were cleaned and repaired, and normalcy returned, as did the drought. In DuBois, young Mary Lou peered into her cistern. It was nearly empty. She stepped outside and gazed into the sky, searching, hoping for a sign of rain. But there would be none today. She'd call the water hauler later.
And then when I first got married, we built a house, and we did put a septic system in. It was up near the Northeast DuBois High School. It was right up there. So we built a house there, and we had a septic system, so we had toilet. But there was no well, so we had a cistern. And somehow the contractor doubled the size of the cistern, so it was completely under our garage. And we had the opening was on the garage floor. And when it rained, I was supposed to go out and turn the gutters so that it washed off the roof, so we didn't get all the roof done, especially if it hadn't rained. So I would turn the gutters and try to clean off the roof, and then all the water, and that's what we drank. And then when the city water came through, we drained it and went down, and it was unreal. My kids were talking about the other day, the frogs and stuff that were in there that, they said, Mom, you guys made us drink that. But anyway, and then it was, Ed Piper, he was my ex-brother-in-law, and I used to go up there and help with his mom's house, and this was an incident that happened to the water. I was on the small porch, and I was painting the trim work, and there was a wasp nest, so the wasp came after me, and I fell back, and the bucket of paint, I had it on a newspaper so I wouldn't get any paint on the roof. Well, it slid, the bucket of paint went down into the gutter, and Joe, my ex-husband, he got a hose to rinse it off, and where did it go? Down into the well. So then we had to go and get the well cleaned out and then haul in new waters.
Cisterns were routine. Just north of DuBois, Lori Hubb's family had one.
We had a cistern, and I can remember when it would rain, and Dad would say, go out, and we'd shut the gutters to a certain point where the water would run through the gutters to flush it out.
Yep.
Then we'd have to go out in the rain again and move them little levers over, and it would start filling into the cistern. And then there was a pump in the basement that it would pump in. And like Danny said, if it got too dry, we had to have the water hauled in.
In Du Bois, Ralph Sager opened the feed mill. He worried that the drought would force more farmers to sell off their poultry and livestock. That would be bad for business and worse for the area. Raised in Du Bois, Ralph joined the Air Corps out of Indiana University. After navigating B-17s, he returned home to teach business and physical education, and to teach. He left teaching in 1959 to work at Du Bois Elevator and raise poultry on his farm. Providing the area with water would become his obsession. Down the road a bit, Dennis Hickey inspected his ponds, the source of water for his hogs and his birds. He swallowed hard. They were alarmingly low. Recently elected to the state legislature, Dennis had already been seeking a solution to the flooding and lack of water, a concern sparked by his father, Ted. In the coming years, his efforts in the legislature would be crucial. Further south, Bill Hauser's family had a pretty good well on their place near Snellville, but they also had a large family.
The drinking water was out of a well that drained from the house, and it was a well. And to be very honest, we had a large family. There were 10 of us in the family. That well was always empty, especially in the summertime. Contrary to what we should have done, I suppose, my dad rigged up a system to take water from a farm pond and run it through a pipe that was inserted into the well, and he put a series of charcoal, sand, and some other fine rock in there, and then that water went into the well, settled in there, and we drank it. And our community there had similar patterns of or types of ways of getting water.
3 miles north of Tazewell in Crawford County, Louis Allstott leaned against his truck. He was parked at a well-used spring. Many years earlier, Daniel Eastridge had piped it to better fill a tank in his truck. Louis had come in the wee hours to avoid the inevitable line. His 300-gallon tank had been filling for a while, so he switched on a flashlight and took a peek. Yep, full enough, he thought. Driving home, he smiled. The line was already forming.
Okay. Yeah, then there's a spring down there. Of course, there's a lot of other springs. There's a lot of other springs down through there, but that's one.
That's one
That's the one they haul water out of. It's known as the Eastridge Spring.
It always had plenty of water.
Oh yes, it ran a good stream. It slowed down. It got dry, but it ran. You'd fill up. I don't know. I forgot how long. Now I knew it wasn't done. I never did. I had a 250 or 300 gallon little tank. I think I hauled on pickup, but when I hauled some, but so there's that big tanks, you know.
Had a little pump
thousands.
to pump it in.
No, it just ran up. They had fixed a little dam like up there where it came out, and they had a pipe in it. And they just put the pipe in, and they just run gravity feed into, and it was up above the trucks, you know. There's a gravity feed in there.
Oh, okay.
Into the tank, yeah.
Yep.
Just ran, and it took, I don't know, I forgot just how long. I knew at one time how long it took to fill up a tank. Well, I did have a bigger tank there one time too. I hauled on a truck. I had 2 different tanks, but I don't know how long it took to fill it. Took up 1,000 gallon now. An hour, I imagine, especially in summertime.
So you sit there and talk to other people waiting for you.
Yeah, I've even came in one night. I remember coming in one night, Friday night, from where I worked second shift most of the time in Louisville, and all the time when I was working up there at Harvester, and I started on water, and I got home that night about 1:30 and hauled on. I think the sun was up. Wasn't nobody hauling then. You had to be yourself. Through the day, you might have to wait quite a while.
And you hauled for yourself and for other people? Or
No,
just,
I didn't haul no other people, just myself.
Just yourself? Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't haul nobody. But yeah, like I say, Eastridge is on the spring, so they hauled.
Right. But it's now underwater, or?
Yes, it's down underwater, down where it was at, yes.
The Eastridge Spring could fill a 300-gallon tank in 15 minutes. It was generally considered cleaner than other springs, so it was a favorite source. But Dan Eastridge and his son Howard hauling water from the Eastridge Spring was a family business.
Before that, we had a cistern, and Dad hauled the water. He had a water hauling business from the Eastridge Spring. The spring was owned by my grandfather, Dan, but then it was deeded to each of the 5 kids. I talked to my cousin Gary last night. Ida Mae, who is 90 now, is the only one that's still alive. Doesn't really know a whole lot, but is still alive in a nursing home there. But it was deeded to them, and then, like I say, Dad had a water hauling business from that. Then after he got rid of the water hauling business, then we had a little 1,000-gallon tank that we'd put in the back of the truck, and we'd haul water in there to put in the cistern at home, and you'd put a little dab of bleach in it. And whenever you put a little dab of bleach in it, they said, well, that's all good. And of course, whenever I was young down there, before I could drive, I would take an old baseball bat that my brother Larry had that they'd given him that was cracked, and I hit rocks. And that's how I learned to swing a bat and hit a little bit in sports. So I learned that there. But that's really, some of my oldest memories. Of course, there was always folks there getting water. And generally, whenever we'd pull in, they'd give us deference. But Dad would always say, oh, go ahead, fill it. I'm all right. Go ahead and fill it up or whatever. But I remember that there was a certain way whenever you just had the pickup, that the water was running underneath you, that you'd just get out of the side and you'd swing that leg around and you'd get in the back and go over and you could get the hose and hook it up and put it in and whatever. And that way you didn't have to get down in the water. But I remember hauling many a load there.
In the bottoms, some people had wells, and some had cisterns. On the ridges, however, wells were rare.
But from the standpoint of the water supply, we, like Mark, we actually had a cistern underneath one of our smokehouses, and we caught water
Off the roof?
off the roof.
Yep.
Caught water to go in a well, and then when it didn't rain, we'd either call Mark's brother Larry to bring us a load of water, or we had our own tank. We'd go get it, and that was the water supply. Of course, I was probably, I'm going to say I was 8 or 9 years old before we ever had indoor plumbing. So water was not a huge thing in terms of having it inside your house, but the water itself, when it came, was certainly a blessing to this area. But couldn't see that from the beginning.
The fact we lived up on the hill, it didn't affect us other than, never affected me at all because I had moved from here before the benefits of the lake really came about. But we had a well. We lived up on a hill, and we had a well, and it'd go dry twice a week in the summertime. We didn't have water, and Larry and I became almost like brothers because he would come at 9 or 10 o'clock at night and unload a load of water. Sometimes he would sit there in the dry part of summer. He would sit down there for an hour and a half or 2 hours to fill up that great big old tank, and then they'd come, of course, run it in that well, and then Mom had to wait for 2 days for it to settle, and then bleach it a little bit so she could even wash our clothes.
Yeah.
That was our water. I mean, that's what we had.
Similar activity occurred in other springs. A popular one in DuBois County was the Bobby Hall Spring near Cusco. Water hauling was a big business, though pretty much unregulated. While some got their water from springs, others pumped it directly out of creeks. Jasper pumped water out of the Patoka River, French Lick out of Lost River, and Paoli out of Lick Creek. English, Tannenberg, and Ferdinand had constructed small lakes, and Orleans had drilled wells. While adequate most of the time, these town systems remained drought-prone. During the 53 drought, flow in the Patoka grew so critically short that Jasper constructed an emergency pipeline from the White River. They hoped it would produce 800,000 gallons per day to replace the depleted supply from Patoka. None of these towns' water mains extended far outside their corporate limits. Rural homes and farms continued to be on their own. Okay, we are 15 minutes into this video and have yet to mention climate change. What gives, you say? Well, we have been talking about climate change all along. Water supply issues in southern Indiana are the legacy of a changed climate, a frozen legacy. Long before man walked the earth, temperature changes irreversibly altered the topography of North America. Those alterations left a legacy that affects life today. The Patoka Lake Regional Water and Sewer District was born to overcome that legacy. To understand the full measure of these global changes, we start with the Pleistocene, the Ice Age. The Earth's temperature was 10 to 20 degrees cooler than it is today. Nearly continuous snow fell in Canada, Scandinavia, and Siberia. Great sheets of ice formed and slowly, inexorably, inched southward across North America. These massive glaciers plowed off the tops of hills and filled the valleys, leaving behind the flat plains. The latest of these to enter and cover Indiana was the Wisconsin. It covered 2/3 of the state. It inched as far south as Terre Haute, Edinburgh, and Richmond. As the map shows, a small portion of southern Indiana was never covered by ice, particularly Du Bois County, Orange County, and Crawford counties. In the north, the glaciers left thick sand and gravel deposits, from which water is easily withdrawn. The untouched south, however, was left with shallow soil, near to the surface bedrock, steep slopes, and narrow valleys. The map of groundwater availability tells the tale. The pink color, the light pink color in the south, is areas that have very little groundwater availability. Thank you, Mr. Glacier. How was the legacy overcome? The legacy was overcome with the construction of Patoka Lake and the Patoka Lake Regional Water and Sewer District. Of course, the history of the district actually begins with the history of the lake itself. With the formation of the Flood Control and Water Resources Commission in 1945. Anton Tony Holman was named the chairman, and he would remain chairman until the 60s. The Flood Control Commission was responsible for all the core flood control projects in the state, dams, levees, and flood walls, and for all floodplain regulation. In 1965, the commission was merged with the newly formed Indiana Department of Natural Resources, DNR. The Wabash Valley Association, formed in 1957, and at once was 8,000 members strong. It promoted flood control and navigation projects up and down the Wabash Valley, which drains 3/4 of Indiana and a large part of Illinois. By 1970, the WVA was so influential that both Indiana Governor Whitcomb and Illinois Governor Ogilvie attended their annual meeting in French Lick. A cigarette tax was imposed to fund the Flood Commission's early studies on Patoka Lake. It was these engineering reports that formed the foundation for the Corps' report, which in '64 was the basis for Congress's approval of Patoka Lake. Many believe the lake was originally for flood control only. However, water supply was a critical component of the Flood Commission's early work. In the Corps' interim report, water supply was crucial to the lake's design. And the state of Indiana planned to purchase the entire 167,000 acre-feet of storage provided by the lake, which the state ultimately did. Where did the idea of the district originate? No one seemed to remember. The Corps report didn't mention a water district. They had merely indicated that the water would be released from the dam into the Patoka River to flow downstream to downstream communities such as Jasper, Huntingburg, Winslow, and Princeton. So where did the district originate? Dennis Hickey worked on the legislation to form regional planning commissions and regional water and sewer districts, spurred partly by development problems around Lake Monroe and Brookville. By June of '74, Crawford, Orange, and Du Bois counties had passed the suggested resolution for forming a district. From that point, the rest is history. On March 18, 1975, the Water and Sewer District was established, encompassing the 3 counties. Ed Piper was named president, a position he would faithfully fill until his retirement in 2011. There was a district, but there was no money and no plan on how to proceed. So they began a search for professional help and soon assembled a team that would lead the district through the development of the project. Edwin Piper, the board president, Jim Birch, an engineer with Midwestern Engineers, Mike Phillips, an attorney from Boonville, and Myron Frazier, a rate accountant out of Indianapolis. Barely 2 months after their first meeting, the district planned to take water from the lake, treat it, and distribute it to the surrounding systems, and do it all before the Corps started to fill the lake. Although it seems logical today, in 1975 there was nothing like it in this state. It's essential to point out that these board members were farmers, factory workers, and small business owners, just ordinary men. None were bankers, investors, or venture capitalists. They had no money, they had no water treatment experience, they had no path to follow. But they did have a shared vision and a shared determination to see that vision fulfilled. For nearly 50 years, the board has seen continual, almost non-stop demand for water and then for water service. So today, 6,000 retail customers and the customers of 24 other utilities get water from the Patoka Lake Regional Water and Sewer District. That's nearly 40,000 homes in parts of 11 counties that would have no water but for Patoka. Water supply from Patoka Lake was a vision shared by generations. The idea was brought to life by many individuals working together with perseverance, doggedness, tenacity, and goodwill. They knew they had to succeed. After all, those kids deserve water too. If you liked this video, found it interesting, please click the like button and share with your friends.